Well, good evening and welcome back to KTN Prime. This is one of the definitive moments of the legal calendar. I'm Jesse Rogers and we're set to host the LSK presidential debate right here live on KTN. So thank you so much for staying with us. And as we've mentioned, tonight, the gavel does not fall in the courtroom. It falls in the court of public opinion. We are live from Nairobi, broadcasting to over 20,000 advocates from across the country, including Kenyans who might be asking why this conversation matters to them. Remember, LSK plays a crucial role in protecting public interest. It's the last line of defense when it comes to matters tyranny and fighting all that. So the elections are slated for the 19th of February, and this debate is coming at a crucial time where the legal profession and the country as well is facing questions, matters to do with constitutionalism and the rule of law, matters to do with professional integrity in the legal field, institutional courage, and the list goes on. So in about 2 weeks, will the advocates choose continuity? Will they choose the might of the senior bar, or will the young bar take the day, or will they choose a radical shift from the status quo? Well, tonight we host the three main candidates, as I mentioned earlier before, who will be vying for the position of president for the Law Society of Kenya. I'll introduce the candidates, even as they're already at the podiums. I'll start with the gentleman on my immediate right, Peter Wanyama, and we do have profiles which we will be seeing shortly on your screen. He is a senior partner at Manyonge Wanyama and Associates LLP. He has over 18 years of legal practice focused on policy review, legislative drafting, and devolution-related litigation. He has experience in national and international law reform consultancies across various sectors such as agriculture and governance, just to name a few. And this is his second attempt at the LSK presidency. His first attempt was in 2024, with his campaign primarily focused on welfare and economic sustainability of advocates. Wanyama, thank you so much for your time. Karibu to our studios.
Appreciated.
Okay. We're equally joined by Mwaura Kabata, who's the incumbent LSK vice president, and he says his job is not yet done. He brings years of practice experience with a focus on litigation and alternative dispute resolution. He's a senior partner at Alakonya Law LLP and leads the dispute resolution department. He has served within LSK structures for over 8 years, previously serving in committees as a general member, and this is his first stab at presidency in the LSK. Mwaura Kabata, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for your time.
Karibu na asante.
Asante sana. Equally joined by Senior Counsel Charles Kanjama, who brings more than 2 decades of legal practice and extensive experience with LSK leadership structures. He heads the Dispute Resolution Department at Muma and Kanjama Advocates as a managing partner. He's previously served as LSK Council member and treasurer from 2012 to 2014, served as the inaugural chairperson of the LSK Nairobi branch from 2016 to 2020, and he equally chaired the LSK caucus of branch chairs from roughly 2017 to 2020 thereabout. He was formally conferred the rank of senior counsel in August 2022, and this is his second attempt to become LSK president, with his first bid in 2020. Will he be a second time lucky? Well, the advocates and lawyers will have their way. But Senior Counsel Kanjama, thank you so much for your time and gracing us with your presence. Karibu to our studios.
Thank you for inviting us.
Okay, I'll briefly start with the rules of engagement, and I'm pretty sure you're well conversant with these matters. We'll give each candidate roughly 3 or 4 minutes to respond to the questions that have been posed. If there's need for clarification or a chance of rebuttal in case any of the candidate is mentioned, we will allocate an extra minute or 2. The rules of order and decorum, of course, apply, where we should definitely apply civility and logical arguments. No need for shouting matches and abrasive manners. When your time is up, you'll get to hear buzzer I think we have it ready. This is what you'll hear when your time is up. Okay, that's the countdown. Once 10 seconds are done, and there is the buzzer. Well, gentlemen, I'd like us to begin with your opening statements, just highlighting the vision you have for the legal profession and LSK in general. I'd like to begin with Senior Counsel Kanjama. You're credited with extensive experience within LSK leadership structures. And this, as I mentioned, is your second stab at the presidency. What lessons have you picked from your prior unsuccessful bid? And what would you want your legacy to be for the 2 years of LSK presidency if your bid is successful?
Okay, first let me say that I focus on the lessons I've picked from my 22 years and a half as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. The lessons I have picked from various positions I have served in the Law Society of Kenya, appointive, elective, as well as volunteer positions. And the time I have spent interacting with lawyers, both during the 22 years and during the last few months as we went around the country talking to lawyers and also campaigning and asking for their vote. And the first lesson is that the Law Society of Kenya is the Lawyers' Society of Kenya. Under Section 4 of the LSK Act, it has 14 functions, and Section 4A adds a 15th function. And of those 15 functions, you'll find that about 11 are focused on representing lawyers, improving the state of legal practice, and lawyers across the country are concerned about shrinking public practice space. They are concerned about the need for us to become more strategic in our expansion of practice space. They want a strong LSK that serves the members. And they want new ideas, fresh ideas. At the same time, there are 4 functions of the Law Society of Kenya that are public-facing. And this relates to the rule of law. And they are happy to a certain extent with how much the LSK has done on rule of law issues. But they also feel that LSK needs to devolve the aspects of rule of law so that they are not all covered in Nairobi. They are covered throughout the country. And they also feel that the rule of law should be dealt with in a more proactive to supplement the reactive approach when there is impunity or violation of court orders. What I have felt as I've walked around the country is that lawyers want a trusted, a tried, and a tested leader. They want somebody who they believe has independence, integrity, and courage. And they also want someone who's a visionary, who's able to build institutions and not just rely on charismatic leadership. That is why they've asked me to run for LSK president, and that is what I offer to lawyers, and once elected also to the members of the public who will benefit from the activity of the Law Society of Kenya. Thank you.
Okay, asante sana. Let's cross over to Wakili Kabata. You've served within the LSK structures for the past 8 years, first as a general council member and currently as the incumbent vice president. Why do you think you're best suited for the role of LSK president? Mind you, as you associate yourself with the successes of the current regime, you definitely can't run away from the failures as well.
Correct.
Yes.
Let me clarify what those 8 years mean. I have not served in council for 8 years. I have served in committees first for about 4 years. And then I served in council as a general member representative for 2 years. And then I served, or rather was given the trust to serve as the vice president of the Law Society in the last 2 years. Why the bill fits me? On excellence. We have done it before. It has been proven that the continuity of leadership and proven leadership is something that can be bankable, is something that can draw returns. I bring a call to the Law Society that what we have done is not giving promises. It is a legacy of progress. And so to sustain this progress, you need a champion who has not only done it, but seen it being done. The call that I bring on the table is a progressive, fashionable institution in the Law Society of Kenya that addresses its needs of its own members, but also needs of the public. Why needs of the public? Because pertinently, the Law Society of Kenya membership offers services to members of the public. And so the public becomes a diaphragm important stakeholder to what advocates offer in terms of services. We have done effective improvement in terms of service delivery in reintroducing a robust enterprise resource planning platform where services are offered in real time and advocates get their services in real time. We have devolved. I have seen it being done that I have made an emphasis to increase funding to branches. We have, as a Law Society of Kenya Council, again, addressed the question of the rule of law and good governance. I have been in court on judicial impunity. I have been in court over police excesses. I have been in court when demonstrators were being charged beyond hours. We have represented clients that are unrepresented. We continue to champion ourselves as a stellar bar. In fact, in the future council that I intend to represent as the 52nd president of the Law Society, I will see to it that young lawyers' needs are addressed, not only in terms of remuneration, but also in regards to what they pay to the Law Society of Kenya. I have seen the reduction of subscription by young lawyers in CPDs, in PCs. I intend to unify the Law Society from those young advocates who live in Rongai and eat mayai to those senior advocates and those mid-bar who struggle to find a place of comfort. And so I bring a call that is cohesive. It is not a promise, it is what I am doing currently. And so in the last endeavor as a president, I intend to finish what I started. Thank you so much.
Okay, well noted, and thank you for staying within the time limits. Wanyama, over to you, Wakili, because I was looking at your campaign and it's anchored on what you describe as a shift from statements to tangible action. Why are you the man for the job? What makes you consider yourself as a qualified candidate for the position of LSK president?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe that the three of us are all qualified to run the Law Society of Kenya. However, Law Society of Kenya is in what I call a state of inertia. Members of the Law Society of Kenya, because of that state of inertia, there are things which the Law Society of Kenya is not doing to the satisfaction of its members. So they have asked me to run for the position of president, principally borrowing from what I did last time when I was campaigning for LSK president. I made a promise as a practitioner who understands the challenges that face our practicing space to address core issues that affect practitioners. Mr. Kanjama has said that they are indeed, under the provisions of the LSK Act, 8 critical functions. And most of these touch on the practice issues, including the welfare of practitioners. However, these issues have not been addressed, and that is why there is a gap. So members have asked me to vie for presidency to clean up some of these impurities. Remember, we are headed into an era where technology and artificial intelligence is heavily impacting our practicing space. We need to do what it takes as the bar to ensure that we adapt the legal profession. We need to ensure that we have a responsive legal profession, because right now there are more than 18 law schools in Kenya. They're all producing lawyers. These lawyers are coming into a market which is completely clogged up. And if LSK does not take action in the next 10 years, then we will have serious and significant problems, especially to the young bar. There are so many challenges which young members of the bar face: unemployment, low remuneration, and significant disparities at the workplace. And they don't seem to feel the Law Society of Kenya. They don't seem to hear, the LSK does not seem to hear the concerns of these practitioners. So to bridge this gap, myself as a practitioner who understands how to reform institutions, I have done the setting up of other institutions before, including the Council of Governors Secretariat. I have developed global institutions. I have seen what LSK as an institution faces in terms of just the systemic challenges. And then I come on board to offer these ideas on how to reform the institution in a much more qualitative and structured manner. At the same time, we will not forget the core functions of LSK, that is to strengthen the rule of law. We will be there for Kenyans throughout, I have just, as an advocate, gotten compensation for a member of the public who has been shot dead by the police. And it's important that we keep that function alive to strengthen the rule of law apparatus in the country. Thank you.
Okay, asante sana wakili. Let's follow up on what has just been mentioned briefly by the candidates. And I'd like to begin with Kabata on this particular juncture, because you've pledged to strengthen the rule of law, promote human rights, deepen unity within the legal fraternity from your opening statements. Speak to those who might question how much change an insider can deliver as you get to articulate some of the strategies you'll use to implement your priority areas.
Thank you so much for that question. First of all, let me start by saying that I have had my colleagues say members told them to vie. That is a very obtuse and loose statement because it has no credibility as to evidence. It is a voluntary process that you think internally and you do it individually. And so back to your question, when you say what impact I will make to deepen the horizon on effecting the rule of law and good governance, I am not speaking from a promise perspective. I am speaking for what I have done. I have filed numerous constitutional petitions individually, not being paid by anyone, individually, to promote and address the question as to rule of law and good governance. I have personally challenged a section of the Excise Duty Act previously in 2021 and 2022 and 2023 as being unconstitutional, and the courts agreed with us on the basis of the high cost of living, which goes to members of the public. When you're talking about the rule of law, you have to speak about Kabata. When you talk about the aspect of members of parliament, and when you talk about the aspect of cabinet secretaries and county executive committee members participating in active elections, I am in court with Babu Owino. The court is here to deliver that judgment. The rule of law is what I speak, and the rule of law is what I engage with day to day. I defend advocates when they are arrested. I address questions as to money laundering and countering of terrorism financing. I have been to court and we won that case that exempted advocates from reporting to the Financial Reporting Center to preserve the content of privilege and confidentiality. Okay. We have laid a roadmap, which is not a promise, it is something that is tangible. Kenyans were there when the Law Society stood with them.
Okay, if we had more time, I'd ask you about LSK being in a state of inertia, has been mentioned by one of the candidates here.
I promised a minute.
Okay, a minute perhaps yes. Too.
I like the perspective that my colleague on my left, Peter Wanyama, usually poses, that the Law Society has been in a state of inertia. Members of the Law Society of Kenya, including members of the Kenyan public, do not agree with him. The Law Society has done a lot in the last 4 years and in the last 2 years specifically. We have improved our relationship with members of the public. We have increased our public interest litigation portfolio to bring government to account on the question of good governance and rule of law. We have been able to challenge excessive constitutional violations in this country successfully, not only collectively, but also individually. So on this platform, in terms of rule of law index, I am talking about what I have done, and especially what I have done without the necessity of pay. A call and a service to the membership of the Law Society of Kenya, and a call and service to the members of the Kenyan public. I reserve my 4 seconds to you.
Okay, we'll pass it forward. Anyway, let's talk with Senior Counsel Kanjama, because you're campaigning on a platform of centered on strengthening the rule of law, integrity within the profession, members' welfare, structured engagement with stakeholders, but perhaps address your critics who might fault your stance on certain constitutional and social rights issues. Kindly articulate your plan, but also tell us, how will you separate Charles Kanjama, the conservative litigator, from Charles Kanjama, the LSK president, if you're successful? Because you must defend the rights of all advocates, including the liberal, progressive wing.
First of all, I don't accept the characterization of Charles Kanjama as a conservative. You said litigator, conservative litigator. maybe you need to know about the various matters I have handled over 22 years. I have been in various matters, taken cases that have broken new ground on constitutional violations, interpretation of the Constitution, and so on. And I think every Kenyan needs to have both a conservative and a progressive side. For example, we now have the Constitution of Kenya 2010. We need to conserve the values in that Constitution. We need to promote them. You cannot jettison what we have just brought in as a social contract and say that it is not valuable anymore. So that is the conservative side. And you also need to have a progressive side. The Constitution of Kenya itself that says that the Constitution is always speaking. It says that human rights have to be interpreted in as broad a way as possible, so long as they do not undermine other rights. So every Kenyan needs to have both approaches. Okay. And regarding the question of separating personal from professional, every lawyer is able to separate a professional. When you are representing a client, you take the client's cause. That is part of what we are trained in as lawyers, to take the cause of your client. It is part of access to justice. And put forth your client's cause to the court or to any forum. When you are representing the legal profession, all the members of the Law Society of Kenya are your members. And you take now a representative approach. Your members are in court every day. Some are for the plaintiff, some are for the defendant. Some are for the accused, some are for the prosecution or for the victim. So whatever you do, you have to be ready to represent all of them. That is the approach to take.
Okay, well noted, Senior Counsel. Over to you, Wakili Wanyama, because you mentioned that you vied in the last election. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, you lost to the current team. The members rejected your vision in 2024. What has changed in the last 24 months that makes you believe you're now the right choice? Why is your vision relevant in 2026 while it wasn't in 2024?
First of all, allow me to say that I have no moral dilemmas, ethical issues. My hands are not tied in any issue, corruption, etc., within the Law Society of Kenya. So I go for fresh ideas. Let me say that I didn't lose the elections, really. We emerged runners-up. It is not easy to convince advocates in the country, and then you emerge runners-up, especially if you're running for the first time. So myself, I thought that was just an introduction to the space of leadership. Remember, I had not served in leadership before, but then members of the Law Society of Kenya resonated with my ideas. What idea did I push through? The idea that Law Society of Kenya, as its first and paramount consideration, it must work for the practitioners. It must do what it takes to protect the practicing space and the welfare of the practitioners. So what happened is that the leadership that won the LSK did not address these concerns. They addressed one major concern, the rule of law issue. And that's what Mr. Kabata is talking about. However, if you ask all these practitioners, what is the status of the legal practice in Kenya? If you ask them, where are we headed as a legal profession? You can see courts issuing orders against advocates. And we can't monitor that risk. You have seen so many challenges facing practitioners. Yeah? The government of Kenya wants to introduce a no-fault-based system that will kill more than 50% of Kenyan law firms. So the lawyers then told me that, Wanyama, the vision that you had for the bar still remains. And that is why my candidacy is member-driven. They still want a Law Society of Kenya to address these issues. They want a bull that will protect the practicing space with the required enthusiasm.
Perhaps as we extend that extra minute, still with you, Wakili Wanyama, to some quarters you come across as a temperamental individual, and perhaps hence you're prone to make some knee-jerk reactions. That's according to your critics. And this reaction might be quite risky considering the capacity of the president of the LSK. You interact with sensitive matters once you're LSK president. Is there truth to this in a minute or so?
Of course not. what happens is that sometimes a client will instruct me to handle a case. By the way, I'm the most friendly person you can ever interact with. But sometimes clients will instruct you and give you a brief the way Mr. Kanjama has said. And then they will tell you, Wanyama, I don't want to go to jail. Look at me, I'm 62 years old. Do what it takes as a practitioner to ensure I don't go to jail. And then when you wear the cloak of that client's instructions, you need to do what it takes. And sometimes we introduce passion, enthusiasm, and verve in legal representation, just to make the client happy. So sometimes some of these things are captured on TV or clip, then they say, oh, Wanyama is radical. But the truth is that you cannot practice law for 18 years successfully, the way I have done, if you don't have great interpersonal relationship and skills. So I believe that I'm suited to lead the bar, and it is that attribute of flexibility, that attribute of being able to fit in, that members want me to lead the Law Society of Kenya.
Okay, as been said, the Law Society has a mandate to members of the Law Society, of course, and a broader mandate to members of the public when it comes to protecting matters of public interest, public litigation, you name it. So I'll throw this question to all the candidates in just 3 minutes. LSK has been very consequential on matters to do with a general election in the past, and we are facing the 2027 general election, which evidently, going by what the political class is saying, will be quite heated. And to have a positive impact in these elections, the LSK would favor, or rather require, a president who is able to speak truth to power without fear or favor. I'll start with you, Kabata. What are your political affiliations, and how do you fit the bill?
First of all, let me start by saying that members of the Law Society have sent me to vie for this position of the president of the Law Society because it's a current, an undercurrent that is being said by both my colleagues. It was meant to be on a funny moment. The real issue that we must face is a Law Society of Kenya leadership, not even president, leadership, that is more focused on its own membership. But because the reality of where we are going is that the 2027 election is a real issue for Kenyans, it requires a law society that is bold, brave, and boundless, one that is proven on progress and not promises. In 2022, for instance, I was serving as a general member representative in council. I also convened the Public Interest Litigation Committee. In that committee, I chaired the roadmap on how the election preparedness from the Law Society was being done. We had funding from many of our stakeholders, and we did the following. We designated advocates as election observers across the country. Across the country, we had elections observers in all counties who are advocates. We mapped all counties and all polling stations, and we could real-time report electoral violence and incidences where we needed to take hands-on. We then went to the Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court, we laid a basis for what we thought would assist in the roadmap to the 2027 election. We talked about valid votes cast and total votes cast. The Supreme Court rejected the argument, even though we said it should not interfere with that particular election at that time. Tanzania laid a basis for how elections can be done. Its sister in Uganda followed suit. It will only be foolhardy if you were to say that it will not happen in Kenya. What is good for a goose is good for a gander. It is important for the Law Society leadership to be one that can talk to power without stammering. I do not receive any briefs from the national government or the Judiciary of Kenya. I am completely independent, and I have done it before. I have filed petitions against the President of the Republic of Kenya without pay. I have filed petitions against the National Assembly without pay. I have filed petitions against the Inspector General of Police in Kenya without pay. I have faced the executive, I have faced the National Assembly with the Senate, and I have faced the Judiciary. Let me cede my ground to my colleagues so that they can say if they could match that. So that we don't also waste on the 23 seconds.
Okay, Senior Counsel Kanjama, your take on the intricacies that come with the general election and the role of LSK in all this.
For a long time, LSK has always been an observer in general elections. It's not the first time. For a long time, they have participated as an interested party in the Supreme Court case on presidential election petition. It's not the first time. But members are asking, this election that is coming is going to be a critical election. What is LSK going to do different from just being an observer? And I think the first thing they want to see is a leader who is demonstrably independent, financially independent, operationally independent, a leader who is not transactional, somebody who they can trust that this one will safeguard the independence of the bar and at the same time, independence during this time of political contestation. And that is independence whereby you are partisan to the principle of rule of law, but you are not politically pushing the agenda of one particular political party over another. The second thing members want, and this is even more important, is integrity. Because in those moments when there are high stakes, they want to see that this leader they trust is not going to be subverted or enter into deals because of questions of integrity that undermine the values of the members who've put them there. The third thing they want to see is courage. They want to see a leader of demonstrable courage, that they know this person can talk truth to power. Not just because they say so, but because they've seen in their track record. Like when, for example, I led lawyers in Nairobi in the Purple Ribbon campaign relating to lawyer Willie Kimani, when he was abducted by a group of administration police officers who were part of a squad that used to carry out irregular assassinations. It was a trying moment, but I did it. Finally, they want to see someone who can work with other actors, who's not somebody who goes alone, who maybe believes that they have all the answers, but who's able to act with other organizations like Uraia, pro-democracy organizations, pro-human rights organizations. That's what they want to see. So ultimately, they don't want so much to listen to promises, because all of us as candidates have promises. Yeah. They are looking at our character, our independence, our integrity, and whether we have the courage to march. And I can tell you honestly and freely, those are the reasons why so many people have been asking me, Kanjama, you must run for elections this time because we can't afford to have a weak LSK, especially in the first multi-party election after our pro-democracy institution, the late Jacom Raila Odinga, is deceased. And we need all our institutions to have more backbone to ensure that our elections are free, fair, and verifiable.
Indeed. Wakili Wanyama, well, what's your take on this being an electioneering year? How will you manage the intricacies that come with such a position as LSK president?
Thank you very much. Being Law Society of Kenya president at this time requires a high level of integrity, emotional intelligence, strength in leadership, and a leader who is not malleable. Once you wear the cloak of LSK president, you are now the Law Society of Kenya president. There are certain responsibilities that come to that office, especially in an election year. Remember, you need to have experienced politicians. You need to know how politicians work. You need to know how politicians operate for you to be able to tame them. And there is one thing which I need to tell Kenyans, that politicians always push their self-interest. And when they push their self-interest, sometimes these interests converge and diverge, and then they converge later. When that happens, you will find that they can shake hands, they disagree, they again shake hands. And when that happens, you will find that sometimes it is the rule of law that suffers the most. So myself, when elected LSK president, and as we are headed into the next general elections, I will do what it takes to ensure that we uphold the fundamental national values and principles in Article 10 of the Constitution. And which value am I talking about here? Rule of law and constitutionalism. Law Society of Kenya must always be on the side of the rule of law. It must always be on the side of a better Kenya. So we will do what it takes. I have a demonstrable record in negotiating with politicians. I have filed 57 constitutional petitions against national government to protect the devolved government system. I have negotiated conceptually satisfying policy and legislative instruments just to protect the devolved government system. So I'm at the forefront, and here I don't make promises. I have tangible results. We have negotiated. We know how parliament works. We know how politicians work. Secondly, and this is very crucial, when you are a Law Society of Kenya president and then there is conflict between the political players in a general election, you must be in a position where you provide leadership. That is why, LSK president, you are not supposed to be a politician. You're not supposed to show weakness. You're not supposed to belong to a political party. Myself, I'm not a member of Ford Kenya. I'm not a member of UDA. I'm not a member of ODM. I am a member of the political party that belongs in constitutionalism. That is the people of Kenya. I am a member of that global political party, the political union where Kenyans are saying, we at Better Kenya, we want you politicians to behave, and Law Society of Kenya, we must be at the forefront. Lastly, Law Society of Kenya president should have responsibility to appear at the Supreme Court when there is a contest. Sorry, maybe 30 seconds?
Sure.
Yeah, Law Society of Kenya president, when there's a contest, when there's a presidential election petition filed at the Supreme Court, Law Society of Kenya president should be able to appear as a friend of the court to assist the court and Kenyans to have a decision that is satisfying and meets the constitutional threshold. Now look at amongst the three of us. Who can appear at the Supreme Court and make those arguments? Definitely me. And I will do what it takes.
Okay, interesting.
Could I say something? Sure. I've not been given any extra time up to now, and I've kept to my time. I think I've argued numerous cases in the Supreme Court, right from the year after the Supreme Court was established. And I think on the question of who can appear in the Supreme Court, I've appeared there in appeals, in advisory opinions, as amicus curiae, which I don't think any of my colleagues has. I've appeared in all capacities. And I believe if that was going to be the test, then clearly Charles Kanjama would be the candidate for LSK president to be selected.
Okay, may the best counsel win. Anyway, still with you, Kanjama, because you had the mic. I'd like your input on an issue in the public domain, because there's ongoing discourse on the courts stalling or dismantling manifesto projects that have been led by the executive, where the courts fault procedural shortcuts, executive overreach, and persistent failure to conduct meaningful public participation. What's your view on the legal status of the policy document that's called the manifesto vis-a-vis the argument of meaningful public participation?
The courts will determine whether any action, whether it arises from a manifesto, whether it arises from a state organ like the executive or the legislature, even an act of parliament, even an action of parliament or of a state organ is constitutional. So they can overturn any of this. And when you look at Article 10 of the Constitution, it doesn't matter whether it is policy or it's an action, even like a law that has been passed. It must comply with the constitutional prerequisites. And one of them is public participation. In fact, that question of public participation is one where the court has been very progressive and has helped to transform the way governance is done in Kenya. I only fault the court in the case of the Finance Bill 2023, where we went to the Supreme Court and they reversed a more progressive decision of the Court of Appeal regarding the extent of public participation. So now all state organs, all individuals recognize that in implementing policy, in implementing public engagements, public participation is an important aspect. But Article 10 of the Constitution does not only mention that as a national value. There are various other national values, about 17 of them, that are also very important to be applied by any person, any public organ, any state organ who is implementing the Constitution or any law or policy.
Okay. Wanyama, over to you, because not too long ago, a Nakuru High Court issued conservatory orders barring the national and county governments and other public entities from engaging, procuring, or paying private law firms. And the petitioner in that case argued that taxpayers shouldn't pay for private lawyers when public entities already employ state counsel and we have some in-house legal teams. We understand the LSK has filed an urgent application to review and set aside the conservatory orders. What's the principle here from where you stand? Does it lay a dangerous precedent despite the staggering expenditure that we see time and time again of public funds that has been spent on legal services? How do we approach this?
Yeah, thank you. Let me first of all start by correcting you. My name is Peter Wanyama, not Wanjama. Yeah. Peter Manyonge Wanyama. Let me say this. You know, when you are a judicial officer, you're supposed to know the law. You're supposed to make a decision that is satisfying, a decision that meets all the thresholds from a constitutional standpoint. So lawyers, and I am happy I participated in that case because we later moved on, we moved to court and we persuaded the judge. We told the judge, you are wrong. Why? Because under Article 227, paragraph 2 of the Constitution, a public agency can procure any services, including legal services. I think the question, and the question which the judge was addressing was the issue of wastage. And I think the judge was more driven by the sensational reporting without contextualizing what lawyers actually do. Let me just mention to you, and I'll give an example. It is true that the state, the Attorney General, the county governments, they have in-house lawyers. But there are some cases which they cannot conceivably handle, one, because of capacity, two, because of conflict of interest. Let me mention capacity. IEBC as a constitutional commission, which was also hamstringed by that court order, every 5 years is sued in all the parts of the republic by anyone who thinks that the election process was not conducted in a free and fair manner. When that happens, IEBC, which doesn't have more than 10 lawyers, does not have any capacity at all because these cases are conducted at the same time, within 6 months. So it doesn't have capacity to go to all the parts of the republic to represent itself. So it must have external lawyers. And then the question of the huge fees can be addressed through a proper procurement process. So there may be cases where the legal fees is high, but the question that we need to ask ourselves is that legal fees justified? So, thirdly, you will find that the judge intervened to condemn lawyers without understanding the context of the problem. Yeah? Because most of the lawyers who work for public agencies are not paid. They are actually not paid. Like IEBC has not paid lawyers who worked for it from 2013, 2017, and 2022. So sometimes these bills accumulate. When they accumulate and then the media picks it up as if it's a huge bill, it is actually pending bills. Nairobi County government usually doesn't pay lawyers very well. It doesn't pay lawyers. You will find most of the claims are historical, dating back to 1990s. Lawyers who worked for the city council at the time. So when these bills accumulate, there's a process of these lawyers moving to court and recovering the fees. So it's not correct to condemn lawyers. By the way,
okay.
Just in 30 seconds, the judge has set aside has varied the conservatory orders and provided for certain limitations, which really recognizes what we all wanted, that you can procure when there is need to use in-house services, go ahead and use in-house services.
Okay, thank you for that. And the point of correction as well, Wanyama. Let's cross over to Kabata, because some say under your current leadership, the LSK stood tall as a defender of democracy and the rule of law. But Bwana VP, your council witnessed a surge in abductions of activists and Kenyans. You filed petitions, as you've mentioned, but unfortunately, some of these abductions continued. In 2026, if your bid is successful, if the state ignores a court order you've obtained, what's the plan B? Will you just file another contempt of court application that gathers dust? How do you approach such a scenario where there's disregard of court orders?
What we are witnessing in Kenya, and particularly in the front of human rights violations, is a defiance of constitutional order. It is not a deficiency of constitutional order, it is a deficiency of compliance. And so I am happy to have served in council that witnessed from 2024, not only from 2024, but from 2022, but the more impact was witnessed in 2024 when Kenyans were disappearing and being abducted and being found dead, probably, or found in tea and coffee plantations. But it didn't stop with ordinary Kenyans. Advocates were also abducted. In fact, some members of the Law Society, including council members, were the subject of not only surveillance, but actual physical harm, including the council members that I serve with. I believe one who was fired at by a police officer at close range with a tear gas canister, and another one who was deliberately arrested in the CBD. We are not talking about an incident which is isolated. We are talking about a continued and progressive deliberate move by the National Police Service with other organs of security in Kenya that are aimed at discouraging and attacking Kenyans to demoralize them from attending to their political and civil consciousness. The Law Society of Kenya did not sit silent. We were in court. We addressed these issues on abductions. The courts agreed with us to the level where at one point the Inspector General, the acting Inspector General, Mr. Masengeli, was called to court and he was charged with contempt. And before his contempt was purged, in fact, we saw a coincidence where those who had disappeared were found, meaning that without the intervention of the Law Society of Kenya at that particular time, if we were not in court, if I was not in court, those three individuals, Bob Njagi and the two brothers, will not have been found. It's not an isolated case. An MCA sitting in Nairobi, an MCA in Garissa disappeared, was abducted in Nairobi. A young Kenyan was abducted in his house, brought to a police station in Nairobi, and died. The Law Society was there. The Law Society does not champion itself as a stellar bar only in the region. It has a mandate, as my colleague has explained, to assist members of the public in matters that are ancillary to law and related to law. When it comes to disregard of these lawful orders, it doesn't end with contempt. There are other tools to enforce the rule of law, and the Constitution itself talks about a reset button. Even defiance of a wrong order is in itself fundamentally in protection of the Constitution. And so there are other mechanisms that can be used to address the contempt of court question.
Okay, interesting. We'll get to interrogate them, hopefully, when we get time. Senior Counsel Kanjama, partisan politics by a member of the Judicial Service Commission has been criticized time and time again. And there's a petition, I understand, filed to Parliament for disciplinary action against one of the members. If elected LSK president, how would you approach such a matter?
Okay, allow me to first touch on what my brother Mwaura Kabata has said, and then I'll come to answer your question. On the issue of rule of law, because I feel I also should say something, there is this story of some people who are relaxing by the side of a river, and as they're relaxing, they see a baby, a small baby, being swept by the waters of the river. So somebody jumps into the water, swims in, grabs the baby, and the water is not very deep in the river, and they save the baby. And as they are trying to understand what has happened and to keep the baby comfortable, they see another baby being swept down the waters of the river. And again, they jump in, they save the baby. And then another baby is being swept down. So sooner than later, they form a rescue kind of like exercise. You have them there, some are standing in the middle of the water, and they're putting out babies who are being swept down the river. And it's a very hectic task. And it's a bit similar to what the Law Society of Kenya is doing, and it's very important. But one person then walks up to them and says, "What are you doing? We are rescuing all these babies who are being swept down the river." And the person asks, "But who is throwing the babies into the river?" And decides to walk upstream to try and resolve the problem. So for me, as next president of the Law Society of Kenya, if I get the votes of members, one of the things I want to do to supplement the approach of rescuing the babies or the rule of law infractions is to ask, who is throwing the babies into the river? Can we stop that person? And so to target those who are violating in a very strong and heavy way so that we reduce the amount of extrajudicial killings, abductions, etc. LSK, of course, has to support those situations where you have abductions. But we need to do more to reduce the number of abductions. Now, coming to your question about a member of the Judicial Service Commission. The Judicial Service Commission members are state officers. And state officers, with the exception of cabinet secretaries based on a court decision that was issued some years back, are meant to be politically neutral. And if they are not politically neutral, they introduce a suspicion about the ability to engage in their constitutional or public role, free of politically partisan interest. So, of course, if I was to become a president of the Law Society of Kenya, I'll take up the matter. Because it's an active issue, I don't want to say specifically what I'll do, but I'll try to make it clear to the members of the Judicial Service Commission, including the current vice chair, who's the one that was found in a political rally, that it is improper for a member of the Judicial Service Commission to be an active agent in the politics of the day.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I think we've tried to canvass a majority of national concerns around the LSK election. And right now, we'd like to focus on matters that is close to the hearts of members of the Law Society. And perhaps we could start with some sentiments that were shared to members of the Fourth Estate, my colleagues, by various members on the priority issues they want addressed by the gentleman who will emerge as the 52nd president of the Law Society of Kenya. Let's listen in.
My name is Anu Tieno.